When it comes to our safety, it is no longer good enough for us to do an after-the-fact response. For all of history, something bad happens and an after-the-fact response takes place. For what we're going to take a look at, we're going to look at the paradigm shifts needed in safety when it comes to situational awareness, knowing and managing fear, as well as dealing with site-specific security issues and active threat and active killer scenarios. So before we really dive into this, let me ask you a question. What do law enforcement, search and rescue, EMS, fire, and the Batman all have in common? Yes, I asked you what do law enforcement, fire, EMS, search and rescue, and the Batman have in common. Each and every one of them is an after-the-fact response. Each and every one of them has to wait until something bad happens before they can do anything about it. What we are looking to do is get it in left of bang. Bang is that event that causes 911 to be called. Bang is that event where you have to respond with a hazmat unit, whatever it might be. Getting left of bang is being able to take a look at what's going on around you and being aware before these things happen. If you take a quick look at the Boston Marathon bombing, the Tsarnaev brothers are caught in video and in still pictures looking at each other while everyone else is looking at that finish line. They're looking at each other because they want to make sure that they are out of that blast radius. They want to be able to witness what happens because they wanted to see the carnage. That's what they were interested in. And at that time, nobody was teaching on it. Now, we know what we need to be looking for. We take what we teach our Secret Service when they do crowd scanning, our FBI, and our Marine Corps combat hunters. We distill it down to the most basic parts. We eliminate the law enforcement and the military side of it, and it's something we can teach in between 4 to 6 hours so that you can be able to apply it to your life day to day immediately. Looking at situational awareness, my own story in public school should have made me the poster child for someone who would have been a school shooter, someone who should have gone on a rampage in their high school. My home life was abusive by any measure, and I was bullied mercilessly. I had unlimited access to dozens and dozens of firearms and thousands upon thousands of rounds of ammunition. I had means, motive, and opportunity. How did I not become that poster child? I was taught that all human life has value, even the lives of my tormentors. So with that, I did not become that poster child, but I should have. I'm very glad that I didn't. Looking more at situational awareness, how is it my school, my counselor, our administration, they didn't pick up on it? Again, it's not something they were looking for. And this is stuff that can be used to identify threats before they have a chance to act. Far too many of us walk around completely oblivious to what goes on around us. We have our own busy lives, we have our email, we have our phone. As one of our previous speakers, Monica, said, put that phone down because it distracts you. My friend Paul is a neighbor, and he's also a local police officer. He would come home and his plate carrier vest was always undone. And it bothered me because from the perceived safety of his cruiser that he brings home after every single shift and the relative safety of his home, he transitions through that transition space where it's not safe. And he really should have that vest fully secured until he gets into his home. And he agreed with me. Unfortunately, he has done so ever since. So you have to ask yourself, what steps do you take day to day to ensure your safety, the safety of your family, the safety of your employees and staff? What is it you're paying attention to? Well, as you start your day, is your routine the same each and every day? Do you always do X, Y, and Z on the way to work? Do you always take the same route? For some of us, that's not an issue, but depending upon what your profession is, you may want to consider whether or not you route yourself different ways randomly. What is it you are paying attention to, such as on your way home from work or after a long day? How about the reality that for each of us, safety is constantly changing? It can change day to day or minute to minute. And as we begin to look at safety through this long overdue paradigm shift, let us consider the following. What is it that you are considering normal in your day-to-day life? What is a baseline? What is it that you expect to see? You walk into work, you expect to see X, Y, and Z. You walk into a restaurant. What's abnormal or an anomaly? What could be considered a possible threat? Ask yourself, what is it you are not seeing or perceiving? I don't mean just what you see with your eyes, but what do you feel when you enter a room? What does your gut instinct tell you? The part of your brain that doesn't use language is the limbic brain. It cannot explain in language what it tells you. But your gut feeling has absolutely nothing to do with your stomach and everything to do with your limbic brain. One of the other important questions you want to ask yourself is, are you physically prepared to deal with what may happen? Beyond that, are you emotionally prepared? We already know that almost everyone in this industry, and all these industries represented here, sees an immense amount of stress. Are you emotionally prepared to take the steps necessary to make sure you make it home to your families every single day? Because if you're emotionally fit, that emotional fitness can overcome almost any physical lacking that you may have. As we dive into this further, let's take a look at the basics. If I were to teach this in the fastest way possible, I would teach baseline. What is normal? What do you expect to see? Anomaly. What is abnormal? What is either above that baseline or below that baseline? Above that baseline means you walk into Olive Garden with your family, you go to sit down, and Ronald McDonald is there at the podium there to greet you and invite you in. That's above the baseline. Below the baseline, you go to Wendy's. You walk in, you don't see any customers. You look a little further in, and now you don't see anybody manning the cash registers. And to look a little bit further, you don't see or hear anybody preparing food. That's called below the baseline. At that point, depending upon who you are, what you do, and your level of comfort with unpleasant situations, you either get the heck out and wait to see if everything's normal, or if you're law enforcement, you're probably gonna call for some help because something's wrong. Why in the world would a fast food restaurant be empty? Something's out of place. Baseline plus anomaly equals decision. Each of these have to have context and relevance to the situation, and you want to use groups of 3 before you decide there may or may not be a problem. An example of this, one of our students was recently finished up his training. He went to the bank. He's been banking there for 15 years. Walks in after parking his car, sees a car sitting out front. The engine is idling. Why is that engine idling? Maybe just waiting for an elderly customer to come out. He doesn't know. Doesn't think anything of it. He walks in, no security guard that's always there at that desk right by the door. Looks a little bit further in, doesn't see any tellers, doesn't see any customers. However, half a second later, security guard walks out, "Hey, it's great to see you. I'm sorry, I had to use a bathroom." A moment later, bank teller, customer, and bank manager come out from the room where they would go through the safe deposit boxes. All 3 of those were nothing more than transient anomalies. But the first thought that went through his head was, oh no, I'm not carrying my weapon today. He is a police officer and he was off duty. Fortunately, it turned out to be nothing. So you can't make assumptions, but you can make inferences based upon good information and make them adaptable to the situation. The other thing I would teach is denial is deadly. If your limbic brain is telling you something is wrong, then something is wrong. Listen to it. You can always come back later and finish up what you were supposed to be doing. However, if you don't listen to it, or the normalcy bias kicks in, where you say, this was normal yesterday, it's supposed to be normal today, and it will be normal tomorrow. This took place on September 11th in New York City. Tower 1 got hit, and a lot of management in Tower 2 told their people, sit back down at your desks, it's okay. Help is coming. You can see the fire trucks and ambulances down there. They will help those people. There's nothing you can do for them. So just sit down at your desks. Everything will be fine. And so most people did, instead of exiting that building before that second plane impacted it. We have no idea how many hundreds or thousands of lives could have been saved had that building been evacuated right away, or people just had the courage to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stay here. Something doesn't feel right. Because you could always come back tomorrow. We found out the hard way. Tomorrow didn't exist for either of those 2 buildings. One of the most important things you can look at are the nonverbals. Without the nonverbals, if you are looking at a text message, you are getting only 7% of what that person is actually telling you. If you've got them on the phone and you can hear their voice, cadence, syntax, intonation, sentence structure, you get anywhere from 30 to 40% of what they're actually trying to tell you. The other 60 to 70% of that conversation is made up of the nonverbals. When you look at a text message, how many of us have read into that text message our own daily emotions at the moment? Things are wrong in our life. Something's not right at work. Something's got you angry, or you're overly happy. Whatever it might be, you read into it your own feelings. At least if you can hear the voice, you know better what they're trying to tell you. But the truth is, when you are dealing with the general public, especially in an emergency situation, or you're dealing with an employee who may be upset, having a bad day, whatever it is, you want to be able to key in on those nonverbals and get the full picture of what they're trying to tell you. The first of those nonverbals is kinesics. It is the use of body language and communicating through expressions, gestures, movement, even the clothing they choose to wear, and several other factors. Nonverbal communication, as we said, makes up between 60 and 70% of what there is. And the more someone tries to hide these nonverbals, the more others are going to stick out like a sore thumb. It's impossible to hide everything that are the clues telling you what they're really saying. These are both learned and instinctual. They are cultural, and at the same time, many of them are universal. Cultural differences can be seen in areas such as eye contact, the distance someone will stand from you, whether or not they'll shake your hand, and hand gestures. Now, a perfect example of hand gestures, thumbs up worldwide is pretty much universal, right? Say, hey, are you okay? Yep, everything's good. The okay sign here in America for the longest time was, hey, everything's A-okay. Recently, we have seen people that have said it is actually a white power symbol. Now, we're not going to debate that here today. It's just a known fact that that has now taken on a different connotation in certain parts of the country. However, if you do this in Europe, you are not saying everything's A-okay. You are calling someone a rather unpleasant name for your backside, or theirs. Like if they cut you off in traffic. All of us have done it. I admit it, I have too. So be aware that these are not always going to be universal all around the world, or even in the same parts, in different parts of this country. When I say it's universal, even blind children who have never had a chance to see another human face will make the very same facial expressions while expressing emotions as sighted children will. Voice actors, when they're doing voiceovers, they're doing animated films, they don't just stand at the microphone and just drone on like, oh, Ferris Bueller's teacher, okay? They really get into it. They're animated. Their faces if they're angry, their faces get red because their body responds to the emotions that they're trying to portray. So again, they are very universal, and at the same time, they're cultural, and they're not the same everywhere. And the better you become at reading the nonverbals, the more situationally aware you will be. Proxemics. Proxemics is the study of spatial relations between you and others around you. This is culturally significant. It is the dynamics of human interaction, and it is driven by both the conscious and the unconscious mind. Not only distance, but also orientation to you. Those of you who work in law enforcement, those of you who are EMS and fire, you deal with an angry or agitated public on the regular. How close that person stands to you will tell you whether or not it's just a comfortable conversation. Are they in your safe space? Have they gotten too close? They're trying to bully you. Or are they backed up a little bit? Me personally, if I don't know you, 9 times out of 10, you'll find me bladed off to one side. When I'm standing, very often my left hand is over my right, which will tell you that I'm right-handed. Why? I'm willing to sacrifice my weak arm for my weapon arm. And I'm bladed because I'm going to protect the weapon side of my body, which is generally my right hip. These are things that you can use to apply as you work your way through day-to-day situations. Not everything is going to go sideways right away. The problem is, when it does so almost without warning. We've watched, all of us, dozens, if not hundreds of videos, probably thousands across this room, where we have seen things go from what looked to be a decent, normal interaction with someone from the public to going sideways like that. We don't want to see that happen to others. So the goal is to bring this information to you so you can teach it to others yourselves. Proxemics communicate whether or not a group is open to new individuals or other members, whether this group may be viewed as a threat by you or someone else. And again, standing position and relative distance are critical. I love elevators. Most people don't. I like turning sideways in an elevator. I don't just face the door. 2 reasons. 1, I don't like having my back to people I don't know. And 2, it's fun to watch the reactions and interact with those people in the elevator. When we take a look at things like biometrics, these are things you cannot control. You get angry, you get red in the face. If you are scared for your life, the color drains out of your face. Goosebumps, sweating, constantly rubbing your hands, blinking, shaking because you're so angry. We all have either been there or we know someone who has. No matter how hard you might try, you can control your breathing to a point. Everything else is just about out of your control. I want to just talk about Kyle Rittenhouse, Kenosha, Wisconsin. There's a great picture of him out there where, depending upon which side of the aisle you're on with this discussion, he has no color in his face. There is no murderous rage to be seen in that image. He is terrified in that image, just based upon the nonverbals, the body language that you see there and the lack of color in his face. Again, this is not a debate that we're going to have here. It's just a reality of what we see in people that they have no control over. If he was enraged and looking to cause harm in that moment, his face would have been red. He would have been angry. The facial expression would have gone with it. Because he's not on film, he's not in a movie. He didn't know he was being filmed at the time. So it's just something to think about, how you can control only some of it, but the rest of it is completely out of your control. It happens without your ability to do anything with it. The next thing we want to take a quick look at is something called atmospherics, the overall attitude or mood or feel of a place, of a room, of a situation. Everyone in law enforcement, fire, EMS, we all have spent time. You walk into the unknown, you walk into someone's home, you walk into a motor vehicle accident, you walk into whatever it is. You get that instant feel. Is this going to go sideways? Is it going to be a normal, everyday call where everything's fine? You do your job, people are happy, no problems. Atmospherics, the indicators are going to come from every domain. So every one of your senses are involved, and especially your limbic brain. Why is this so important? Why do I keep hitting on it? Because it is the one part of our human brain that only cares about your survival. There's no agenda there except you surviving, and you can't put it into words. How many of you on the job have been out there and gone, you know what? Something's wrong here. Whether you're a firefighter, you're a fire captain, a chief, whatever, you pull your team out and the building collapses. You have no good reason as to why, but you did it anyway because your gut told you this needs to happen. It happens in law enforcement every day. It happens in EMS. It even happens in other aspects of this world, whether it's healthcare in various levels, in schools. It's all the same. Your limbic brain will tell you when there's a problem, long before any physical sign will be there for you to act on. Atmospherics can differ from culture to culture, and it is one of the most difficult of the nonverbals to get down, because it requires you to turn off your conscious analytic brain temporarily and listen to the part of your brain that can't tell you why something's wrong. When you get down to it, atmospherics can tell you the level of trust or comfort you should have with a specific situation or individual, the attitude or the mood of a room. Now, we've all walked into a restaurant and we're like, oh, this is great, let's sit down and have a meal. Or you're walking, you're like, we wanted to try this one, but maybe not. And you walk out and go somewhere else. It will tell you what your security posture or level should be based upon your gut read of that room and the presence of perceived threats. Using these techniques not only can save lives, but they can give you a tactical shortcut in your decision-making process. It is impossible to take in all of the information you're going to see. If you try to take it all in, you will be overwhelmed. The goal here is to take in enough information to make adaptable and reasonable inferences that then can change on the fly. Now, this sounds, to some people, an awful lot like science fiction, because it's, oh, it feels this way. The reality is the Secret Service and our FBI have been using these techniques for a very long time. It's how they identify threats before that threat gets to act on the president. Do they get it right all the time? No, because the criminal element only has to be right once. We have to be right almost all the time. It's just a reality of what we do. You want to use proactive search. What that means is just be aware, look around. What looks out of place? What looks normal? You want to make sure that, again, you do not try to take in all of this information. The goal is to give yourself 1% more situational awareness. 1% more situational awareness will give you approximately 1 second of decision-making time. And the more you become aware, the more you're going to be able to actually have that time to react. This is stuff that you can teach to yourself, you can teach to others. This is not rocket science. It is actually something that we can apply in less than 4 hours if we have to. Perfect example of this. One of our Marines came back from his deployment overseas. He was one of our combat hunters. He taught this very same stuff to his teenage daughter. She was 19 at the time. Taught her baseline, anomaly, baseline plus anomaly equals decision, and that denial is deadly. Within a few months of him teaching this to her, she found herself in Las Vegas at a country music festival. Everyone's there, they're up towards the front, the music's pumping, everyone's having a great time, and that first volley of shots rings out. She grabs her fiancé. Those were gunshots. No, they weren't. Those were fireworks. No, those were gunshots. The music's still going on. There's no pyrotechnics. There's nothing in the sky. And she grabbed him, grabbed their friend, and bolted from where they had prime standing place right there in the crowd. And before the second volley of shots rang out, they made it to safety, along with about 3 or 4 people who followed them because they just felt they know something's wrong, so we're going to follow. Just those 4 things, baseline, anomaly, decision, and denial is deadly, saved her life. That's all he taught her. Out of an entire huge program that the Marine Corps teaches, he taught her those 4 things, and it saved her life and the life of her fiancé and several other people. You can use this each and every day, and you can teach it to your families. The next paradigm shift we need to see is knowing and managing fear. This is from a program created by Coach Tony Blauer. Tony Blauer, when he was a child and a teenager and into his 20s, was supposed to be Canada's next Olympic golden boy. He practiced in downhill skiing like he was gifted by God and should never lose a race. Yet through his entire skiing career, he never won a single race because fear controlled him race day, every day. He would go into the woods and throw up 4, 5, 6, 10 times before a race because he was that nervous of failing. He was that afraid of letting his coach down. And ultimately, that's exactly what he did. Imagine being considered the golden boy for Olympic medals, yet never being able to win a race. From one of my favorite movies, the original Dune, fear is the mind killer. It will destroy you. It will destroy your dreams. It will destroy your aspirations. It will destroy your motivation. Too many of us today live in fear or are controlled by it. And don't worry, gentlemen, we're going to get there because all of us men are terrible at dealing with our own fears and talking about them. How many of you have ever heard of the No Fear Apparel Company? Show your hands. Okay, huge company in the 80s, and it died out about 2003. Great marketing slogan. They had a great company. But the reality is, no fear, N-O fear, is a lie. We all feel it. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do. Fear is real, and it will eat at you nonstop every day if you let it. Instead, you want to know fear, K-N-O-W, fear. Become friends with it. Learn to make it work for you. There is a way to use fear as fuel and a way to motivate you instead of allowing it to control you. This system works for men and women, and it works every single day in every situation you can find yourself in. You cannot be brave if you are not afraid. It's the truth. Can't possibly be brave of something and in a situation if you're not originally afraid of it. Let's face it, fear sucks. That is, until you challenge your relationship with it. And I'm going to share with you some proven strategies to make it work for you. There are just 5 tips from the No Fear, K-N-O-W Fear training that we offer, again, by Tony Blauer, that can start you in reframing your understanding of fear, will teach you how to use it to benefit you and those around you. Managing fear can literally change your life. And once again, this is something you can begin to apply immediately to your life. No one likes the feeling of fear, but we all know it well. Maybe you're new on the job and it's your first really nasty call that you're going to. Or if you're new in law enforcement, it's your first domestic. We know exactly how dangerous those are. Maybe it's your first job at a chemical company and you find yourself working around stuff you still are trying to understand. Construction, doesn't matter what it is. Aside from the changes that fear causes in our physiology, it's the psychology that we need to pay attention to. The problem is we all focus on what it makes us feel physically. And then in turn, we begin to feel less. We begin to feel as though we can't handle that situation. We begin to feel maybe as though you're an imposter, you don't belong. You know how many public speakers never become public speakers because they don't believe they belong up here, that they don't have enough knowledge to offer anyone? Thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And sometimes it's just one person who says, you know what? You're really good at this. You should keep it up. That makes all the difference in the world. Aside from those changes, you need to understand that fear wastes time because fear causes doubt. Doubt causes hesitation. Hesitation causes procrastination. And at that point, you find yourself doing anything but what it is you should be doing. Why? It's just the way our brains work. It is really easy for negative self-talk to stand up. How many times have we yelled at someone through the car window because they did something stupid in front of us? How many times have we walked out of a room with either a coworker or a family member, a child, and they're there, we're over here, and something flies out of our mouths that is negative? All of us do it, every single one of us. Every pastor I know does it, everybody, because we're human. You need to change that dynamic so that you are speaking more positive things out of your mouth out loud than you are the negative. Because if you don't, that fear will continue to grow not only in you, but you will foster it in others. These are just some of the byproducts of fearful thoughts, and we all have them. So here are the 5 tips. This is the beginning of the No Fear, KNOW Fear program. Instilling these 5 tips into you, and then going beyond that with the entire program. First and foremost, fear is manageable. You need to separate the physiology from the psychology. You get those two separate, and everything begins to work better. The reframe is this: listening to your own fear can be far more damaging to you than losing or failing, because fear constantly multiplies on itself geometrically in your mind and in your heart. It will constantly tell you you're not worthy, you don't belong there, you don't deserve this. Whereas in losing or failing, you at least can learn a lesson. You can see where you made your mistakes and you can grow from it. Fear wants to stop you from growing all the time. Over the course of history, ask yourself this: how many billions of people throughout all of human history have given up on their dreams, their aspirations, their goals, their relationship because they felt fearful? They didn't want to step out because it created that self-doubt. Billions of us have. Every one of you in this room has let something slide. I know I have, all because I didn't believe in myself. I was fearful. Fear will be there through almost everything. You need to learn to expect it. You need to learn to embrace it. And then you need to learn to use it. And I'm going to say you can even abuse it. Because fear, you can abuse it. It's not going to be mad at you for it. It really won't. The secret to improving your performance in almost every aspect of life is in understanding the psychology of fear and what it does to you. The secret is not in trying to eradicate fear. You can't. Ask any soldier on the battlefield. They'll tell you fear is real. There's an old saying, and I can't say old, but it's older than me, that's for sure, and I'm only 51, that there are no atheists in foxholes, and when there are tests, there's always prayer in school. Every soldier I have ever known, young to old, if they've been in combat, they will tell you fear is real. And they either learn to deal with it and grow through it, or it controls them. and we find them suffering serious issues. And it's unfortunate that more than 22 of our soldiers per day take their own lives. It's tragic that we lose 3 times as many law enforcement and first responders to suicide as we do line of duty deaths. And it happens because of fear and a lack of ability to step up when they need to. And I don't mean step up and overcome that fear. I mean stepping up and saying, I'm struggling. I need some help. From now on, I want you to think of your new job title as that of fear manager in your life. That you are going to control that fear, and you're going to learn how to make it work for you. Those who manage their fight manage their fear. And it is also true in reverse. Number 2, fear is normal, even though it feels abnormal. No one, and I mean no one, likes to talk about fear unless they're up here talking about it. Men, this is doubly true for each and every one of us. Something about the average male psyche makes it darn near impossible for us to be open and honest about how we feel. And I don't just mean about fear. I mean in general. I am a master at boxing up things. I learned at a young age, because of my childhood, how to compartmentalize everything. And I'm really good at it to this day. I'm also an isolationist by nature. I like being alone. Give me and my dogs, and I am happy as can be. I don't need anybody else. But I also know that I will self-destruct if I do that, because I'm not capable of living completely, utterly alone. I actually like my friends, even though I might have to convince myself I need to get out of the house and go do something. So yes, the person up here in front of you is actually an isolationist. I like being alone. I've never understood the concept of being lonely when alone, and that's abnormal. I freely admit it. But at the same time, it's given me the ability to be able to learn from all of that and be able to be up here to speak to you and others. There is a profound realization when you realize that you can open up about what's really going on. And I don't mean you necessarily need to open up to a counselor, although my wife is a professional counselor, and I do highly recommend it for those who need it, and medication as well, because sometimes our brain chemistry is what's damaged. It's not how we think initially, it's not how we process information, it's the fact that our brain chemistry is not healthy. And thus, you can go short-term and then get your brain chemistry back where it belongs, and some people, they might need it long-term. That's okay too. My godson was one of those people, and unfortunately, he ended up taking his own life because he just refused to take the medication he should have. Instead, he wanted to self-medicate with marijuana and every other drug that he didn't have to inject because he was terrified of needles. Although he did like injecting his steroids, he became a roid-raging maniac and then ultimately burned the family house to the ground because he was trying to burn the cameras that were in the walls out. And he was a relatively normal, happy, healthy teenager and into his early 20s until all of this set in. Don't be ashamed of asking for help because it's important. It's the one thing that you can do that will help not only you, but your coworkers, your friends, your family. I guarantee it. Misunderstood fear. Men, especially, and men around other men. Misunderstood fear can have a toxic effect on each of us. It robs us of enjoyment because it makes us dread the experience. Mismanaged fear, on the other hand, can also have a toxic effect on us because it can lead us to avoid making important decisions about health, relationships, business. I don't want a show of hands in the room, but how many of you in here have put off going to see a doctor because you just don't really want to know? I can guarantee you, if we put hands up and people were honest, at least 60% of this room would put their hand up, at least. Because as men, we don't want to deal with our weaknesses. We don't want to deal with our shortcomings. We don't want to deal with the problems. We just want to go to work. We want to do our job. We want to take care of our families. Plus, as was said earlier, many of us are breadwinners. We can't afford to be down for that length of time. I can't afford that surgery right now, so I'm going to put it off until finally you can't move. When you truly learn to make friends with fear, you will learn to manage it. You need to understand it in a brand new way. The fear will dissipate when the stimulus that triggered it no longer holds you hostage. And that's what it is. It's a hostage situation in your own mind. To do this, you must change your relationship with fear. You absolutely must. There's no way around it. So the next time you feel that physiological and psychological effect of fear, take a breath. Now, I understand many of us, we don't have time to step back and take a breath. So that's why you want to learn this so it happens like that. Walking to your car alone at night. How many of us, no matter whether male or female, no matter how old or young we are, dark night, empty parking lot, nothing but the click of our boots or our shoes walking through that lot, and yet somewhere in the back of our head is this thought, irrational as it might be, that there's somebody out there. We are afraid of things that haven't even happened yet. Children, monster under the bed. As far as I know, in all of human history, there's never been a monster that's come out from underneath that bed and devoured that child right in their bed. It's an irrational fear. The same is true for a game you might win or lose, a promotion you may or may not get. The list goes on and on. We can talk about this for hours. We could be here until tomorrow morning easily, just on the fears each of us have. Each of us have had as children all the way up through now and what we may be afraid of in the future. The paradigm shift is this. Fear needs to become your friend, and you need to use that fear to guide you to where you need to be. And when you're facing it, you want to use it to reframe that moment in your life. Tip number 3. Fear tricks you into thinking you're not ready. Had a conversation briefly today with someone who admitted that had one person not spoken out in their life, they'd be in a very different place than where they are right now. One sole individual stepped out and said, "You need to do this." And that person did, and their life was forever changed for the better. How many people in the world never get started with something because they're afraid? How many people stay in the job that they've been in for forever or that industry forever because they're afraid to step away from what they're comfortable with? The reframe, your mind controls your body. How you think affects how you feel. How you feel affects how you think. And how you think affects how you move. If you are afraid, you are not going to make good decisions. If you are feeling the physical effects of fear, it's not going to go well for you because you haven't learned to overcome it yet. You must understand all of this completely controls your destiny. You either will succeed or you will fail because of fear. It's that simple. It doesn't matter what industry it's in. It doesn't matter if it's at home with your family. It's the truth. If you fixate on negative thoughts, you will create an emotional weight that will make it almost impossible for you to be happy. It'll make it almost impossible for you to succeed. You will forever be striving for that next goal that you're afraid to take on as a challenge. And then that fear, that emotional weight, spreads out like a flood to your family, to your friends, to your coworkers. It's impossible for it not to because those people care about you. So they know what's going on. They can feel it even if you're not saying it. It's that limbic part of their brain saying, hey, something's wrong with this person over here, but they're not telling you about it. But they worry about you nonetheless. Even if they know they can't change it, they still worry about you. So it's not just you that's affected by this. Tip number 4, courageous people feel fear. Did you know that Mike Tyson would throw up before each and every match, each and every boxing match? Sir Laurence Olivier, the great actor, would throw up before every performance. The people you see on the news, ESPN replay, or an actor putting on an amazing performance, you think they've got something special. They do to a point. And that special is they believed in themselves enough to become who they are. Take a look at Robert Downey Jr., my apologies. At one point, he found himself seriously messed up with drugs and alcohol, and he turned his life around. He finally reached a point, and I'm sure people helped him say, this isn't working. I don't care who you are. You can self-medicate with anything you want. None of it's going to make you any better. And your friends and family know it. Some of them care about you enough to say something, and some of them are afraid because they don't want to ruin that friendship. Every person in this room, take a little catalog for a moment and think about who you know that's struggling. I know about 50 people from the NYPD, FDNY, that are still alcoholics since 9/11. Still, to this day, on the job, and they are functioning alcoholics because they don't know how to get through their day yet, and it takes time. And it might take them 20, 30 years, who knows, till they get their life straightened out. It doesn't happen overnight. Trauma like that is real. Trauma like that doesn't go away. People like me who can compartmentalize, yeah, I seem like I'm fine, but the reality is I have my own unhealthy coping mechanisms. They don't involve drugs or alcohol, but I can be a workaholic in a heartbeat, so I can deal with everyone else's stuff and never have to deal with mine. And from the shaking of heads around here, there's at least 5 or 6 people I can pick out right away that know they are in that same boat. The great boxing coach, Cus D'Amato, once said, "The difference between a coward and a hero is what they do with their fear." The reality is, both of them feel it. One of them lets it control them, and the other one lets it fuel them. Bottom line, courageous people feel fear too, no matter who it is. We have all seen numerous movies based upon true stories, and real fear is there. And these men and women have overcome it because they learned to apply that fear in a way that makes a difference and strengthens them. When you change your relationship with fear, you will change your life. Tip number 5. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. Fear, a mob, a stampede, is real. We have all seen stories, maybe some of us have responded to these, where a crowd starts to move because of panic and fear, and people get trampled. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. How many people have seen someone step up and begin to get involved when a situation went sideways, and others then stepped in and started to help out? We saw this at the Boston Marathon bombing. After it was all said and done, the bombs were done going off, the people were done being hurt, and the panic ran, people started to come back, and they started to render aid. The average person, no special training, took their shirt off, ripped their pants, whatever they had to do to provide a tourniquet, to provide something to try to staunch the bleeding. Courage is contagious. Ask yourself these 2 questions. If you did not fear fear, how would you feel? If you did not fear fear, what would you do? What would you do if your life had less control by fear? Being fearful is learned, and we all get very good at it. But so is being courageous, so is being brave. And like a muscle, you can exercise that bravery and overcoming fear. What happens next is completely up to you. You can use it to fuel you, or you can use it to drive through that conflict and that confrontation. And whatever it is that triggered that fear spike in you can be a source of immense power. That's the serendipity of all of this. Courage can only be found when you take a deep look at fear. Without looking at it, without digging deep into it, you can't learn from it. I can place a physics book right here. Maybe I shouldn't use physics. Yeah, we use physics. Put it right there. Unless you open it up and you read it and you dig deep into the principles there, it's just a book. Heavy book, but it's just a book. It doesn't mean anything to you. You haven't learned anything from it, unless you've already taken physics. So remember, fear is contagious, but so is courage. Always choose courage. Practice your courage by changing your relationship with fear. So what's next? Next would be the entire No Fear, K-N-O-W Fear program by Tony Blauer. He spent 43 years researching fear. He dealt with interviewing fights, victors, losers, victims. Believe it or not, even the criminal element in society feels fear. when they need to take that next step and act on that criminal impulse that they're going to take advantage of, they're wondering, am I going to get caught? Is my intended victim potentially armed and capable of making me dead? Truth is, criminals, especially violent criminals, they don't fear the police. They don't fear the criminal justice system. They don't fear the prison system. Their biggest fear is whether or not you, your friends, your family, and the general public at large can actually defend themselves effectively. The idea that we will ever get to a place of no fear, N-O fear, is an illusion. It doesn't exist. Because without it, you can't be brave. We all feel it. Fixating on fear means you are either procrastinating, generating anxiety, avoiding it, dreading it, and ultimately just fueling that negative emotional cycle. It's just the reality. And you certainly are not improving your own self-awareness. It is a difficult topic because it involves so many aspects of humanity and of ourselves and parts of ourselves that many of us, myself included, have pushed deep down. Because we want to be good at what we do. We want to be seen as best at what we do, the best that we can be. And we don't want people to see it as weakness. Fear is not weakness. Fear is real. Medications are not weakness. They are reality for some people, short or long term. Counseling. How many of us at least have heard of going through post-traumatic stress debriefs? And that's old school because I haven't been in EMS since 1998. But it's real, and we need to learn to work within it. The next topic I want to take a quick look at is a 10,000-foot view of site-specific physical security evaluations and dealing with active threat and active killer scenarios. This is something that has only recently gotten a lot of talk, and it's something I never really wanted to add to my business, except I was asked to by many, many people. Physical security. I don't care what building it is. The reality is, if you are truly going to control what goes in and out of that building, you need one point of entry and egress. Yes, there'll be other doors, and they have to lock automatically when they close with crash bars for safety so people can get out in the event of an emergency. Cameras on all those doors, if at all possible, so you can see when those doors are opened. Timers on those doors, preset, so after 90 seconds of that door being open, when it shouldn't be, an alert is notified to security in that building or at least to administration. All doors and door lock areas should be reinforced. All first floor windows that are large enough to gain access should be reinforced in some way, whether you want to use 10 mil or better security film, or you want to go to the extent of putting in ballistic glass. Armed security, depending upon the location and the level of security desired. Every building, every business, every school, everything is different. Not everyone has the budget that the U.S. military has to harden a building. But at the same time, you don't want to turn an elementary school into a prison. You don't want them to feel as though they're unsafe every time they show up there. Next, do you or do you not want armed staff? Is that staff going to be armed all the time? Or are you going to have multiple biometric safes that are monitored by cameras that only specific staff members have the ability to access? Pre-planned actions for an active threat scenario. Now, an active threat means that something is happening outside of your building. Doesn't matter if it's a school, a hospital, a daycare center, a fire department, whatever it might be. Something's happened, you've got an active threat in the community. So what are you going to do? What is your plan to lock down and keep your staff and the innocents that you might be responsible for safe? Pre-planned actions for an active killer. Someone's gotten in your building with intent to do serious harm. Doesn't matter what it's with. I say active killer because I don't care if they're using a car, a knife, a baseball bat, a gun, or their bare hands. Every one of them can kill you if the person's motivated enough. The goal is to have a pre-planned set of actions in place so that you are able to do something about it and mitigate the risk and the danger. As we close here, I want to take a look at the Jay County School District out of Indiana. Their superintendent is a member of the Army National Guard, and he has taken a serious interest in protecting the students. And when I say serious, he's gone to extremes. He has gotten grant money and has gone all out. Every single main entrance into every one of those school buildings is a double door main entrance. You have to get buzzed in through the first door. It has to close and lock behind you before they watch you come in that second door. And every piece of glass in those buildings is ballistic. You'd need a .50 caliber sniper rifle to get rounds through. He went all out. All the doors are reinforced. All the lock areas are reinforced. You can't shoot through them with an AR or an AK. Even a .308 is going to have serious issues. School resource officers are something they only recently added. Armed school resource officers in every building. On top of that, they also have added almost 4 times as many cameras as they originally had. Why? Well, they want to be aware of what's going on everywhere that they can, and they've tied them into the 911 center. So that if an event happens in the school, there are live feeds from every aspect of that school right in the 911 center. And there are dedicated people who know where those cameras are in that school, and they can direct first responders to where the problem is. They do have hidden handgun safes with biometric locks. Now, these are not for teachers, because they don't want the teachers to leave the students alone in their actual classrooms. What they want are janitors and admin personnel and people who are not actually teaching students at the moment to be able to go in and get those weapons if needed. If there's an active threat in the community and the school goes on lockdown, those people are authorized to arm up, and it's on their hip at that point until that threat is passed. Metal detectors have become now normal. Classrooms. All of us remember our high school classrooms. Some of us maybe all the way back to elementary school. But those doors to those classrooms have a window. They have gone with narrow windows that allow a very limited sight picture into the rest of the room. You can see the teacher's desk and the teacher, but you can't see all the way into the room. They've also gone so far as to put different colored tile carpet or tile down in an area where once you reach that point, you can't see anymore, so all the students know that over here is safe. You can't be seen. Now, what do you do when you have a student that's a former student and now there is a problem? It's unfortunate, but statistically, they're not going to be aware of that. And it's just one more safeguard on top of all of the others they've put in place. Along with those windows, and again, those tiles, every staff member now has a badge. We all have a name tag in here. Every school district that I know of has name badges and IDs for everyone. The new badge that they carry is an RFID badge, and all they have to do is push a button on it, and the entire school instantly goes down on lockdown. No picking up a phone, no hoping your cell phone has signal. You push that button, snap your fingers, all the doors lock, and nothing happens until they make it happen. That way they have more time to protect their students. And all of that's great. But the most important thing they have done is something called the Sandy Hook Promise app. It is an application that was created, I think, by one of the parents from Sandy Hook or a combination of them. And in this app, you can report anonymously threats, suicidal students, bullying, planned fights. Anything that affects the safety and well-being of those students can be reported there anonymously and then can be dealt with appropriately by staff. One of the other things that we do is I've partnered with a company that does an overview of your building and creates a map and then takes that map both above and inside and then partners with local law enforcement, fire, and EMS and creates a response plan. So if something does happen, you're told to go in through entrance A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever it is, go down hallway 1, take a right on to hallway J, and go in through door 1 or door 10, whatever it is. You have a perfect map, and you can look at it before you even get there. And they do this for every building that they work with, whether it's a school, a hospital, a daycare center, an industrial complex. It doesn't make any difference. Bad things happen everywhere because people are human. We have bad days. We have people that have mental illness issues. We have people that need a lot of help. So the goal here is to make a difference. The goal here is to make it possible so that when something tragic happens, not only is the staff prepared, but first responders know exactly where they need to go as quickly as possible. Because we're tired of seeing so many innocent lives lost. And I'm sorry, I don't care what the weapon of choice is. I really don't. Weapons are weapons, and it's only a weapon when it's misused to harm someone. I can take a chair and make it a weapon. Not so much as water bottle, unless I froze it. There's so much more to cover here, but there are so many variables in all of the different buildings that we could possibly talk about. And budgets are the overriding factor in so many of these areas and these needs. One of the major differences between us when it comes to our active threat and active killer trainings versus the rest of the world and the rest of the country, most people will teach it run, hide, fight. We change that up. We teach it fight, run, hide. Why? Because whatever you train in the least is generally the thing you train in the last. If your fighting training is the last thing you're taught, it's the least one, it's one that gets the least amount of attention. The reality is that almost every adult and every child, almost every, can run to some degree. And I don't know about all of you, but I loved hide and seek as a kid. So teaching the adults how to fight back to protect themselves and to protect the innocent around them is our most important concern, beyond creating a plan to make sure that building goes on proper lockdown. I want to thank all of you for all of your time today. I hope that you are getting as much out of every aspect of this event, and if not more, than out of my keynote. I'm only a small part of this. I am grateful to be here. All of you make a difference not only in the community at large, but in your own homes. Take whatever you learn from here and apply it wherever you can, and teach it to everyone who will listen. Because you can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. Tony Blauer can't do it alone. This is why he teaches this to so many people all around the country who then go out and teach it to others. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing all of you at the round table and answering any questions you might have. Thank you.